Welcome back to Something's Happening Here. I'm your host, Steve Hicks, and I am happy to say that if you are watching this live or close to live when we broadcast it, then today is the day before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving just might be my favorite holiday of the whole year for a number of different reasons. I am a Christian, obviously, and this is a holiday, the basis of which is thanksgiving to God for the blessings he gave to the Pilgrim forefathers in America. Thankfulness is a Christian concept, but also I think thankfulness is just lacking in the world right now, and societies across the world would be better if we all had a deeper sense of gratitude and thankfulness. It's an inherently American holiday, right? I mean, Canada has a Thanksgiving too, but it's an American holiday at its core. It remembers the kind of founding pilgrims to America. And it's a great holiday. It's good food, good time, good families, good ideas. And I have family history back to the Mayflower. It's true. On my father's side of my family, we can trace ourselves back to the Mayflower. So Thanksgiving literally remembers my ancestors. So, therefore it's about my favorite holiday all year long, and I'm delighted that I get to bring you a message today, and tomorrow there should be a message as well. So happy Thanksgiving to you. And we're going to talk about Thanksgiving, prophetically speaking, today, as it relates to the topic that we have been discussing in the previous couple days, which is this problem in Iran. The death of this young woman for improperly wearing the hijab. She was arrested by the morality police for that reason, and while in custody, she was beaten to death. So there were protests that happened all across the country, and media responses and governmental responses and problematic responses that we've been talking about. How in the world are we going to make this about Thanksgiving? Well, let's get to it and we'll find out. So, by the way, before we start, I just want to say, however you are listening to us, thank you. So, oftentimes people listen to their podcasts like in their car on the way to work or while running errands, or sometimes at home after a long day. So, wherever you are, thank you for including us as part of that time. We know there are lots of things you could be listening to, but you're choosing to listen to us. So, we really appreciate that. And I hope that you are fully subscribed wherever you're watching this, to like the page on Facebook or hit the subscriptions on whatever platform you're watching this on. All right, let's get to it, shall we? Let's look at our first article for today. Yesterday's segment, we were talking about these fact-checking articles. Oh, no, we're not putting lots of people to death in Iran, right? But they're not even just reporting that fact. They're being a lot snarky about it. Like, no, I mean, you idiot for believing this, and it's actually this other way. So we talked a little bit about why that is a problematic way to do journalism. But here we are on an article that came out. In fact, let me just check this. The day after the Verify This article that we talked about in our last segment. This one comes from CNBC. More protesters in Iran have been sentenced to death as political unrest continues. So it's like, if you don't realize that your snarky approach to something is improper just because it's snarky, maybe do you realize it when the very next day someone publishes something that kind of undermines what you were being snarky about? Maybe, just maybe. In any case, it's still the fact that 15,000 people have not been sentenced to death in Iran. But it's also a fact that more are sentenced to death as the days go on here. So this is a pretty complicated issue. It's a complex issue. Clearly, right? The media can't get their minds around it. It's this way, but that was wrong. So it's actually the first way we thought about it was totally incorrect, except now, oops, that second way we thought about it was also incorrect. So it's like, it's complex. It's ripping Iran apart. It is decimating whatever credibility the media has left, that's for sure. But there's another aspect to this too, an aspect that's going to bring it close to home for us prophetically and close to Thanksgiving for us as well. So I'm reading now from Politico. Now, this is not a politics show, but politics are in everything, right? So I used the Politico article because of its bias. It is a left-leaning article, and so therefore, if it is critical of anything along the liberal spectrum of things, you can't just dismiss it like you would dismiss that same thing in a forum like Fox News, right? Oh, those stupid conservatives, right? But here in Politico, that is generally friendly towards the things on the liberal side of things, the Politico article says it quotes President Biden saying, "Everyone thinks we have magic powers," regarding Iran. So everyone thinks we have magic powers, Biden seeks a balance on Iran. That's actually what I want to talk to you about today. Why are we finding a balance here? What is the need to find a balance? It seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? This is a country that has one of the largest number of death penalty cases across the world, year over year, right? In terms of this nation puts this many to death and whatnot. They're really close to the top of that list. So they have a pretty bad human rights record in that regard. They're also probably the number one leading sponsor of terrorism globally, right? They are actively supporting Russia in its battle with Ukraine. They have been a thorn in America's side for 45 years, almost 50 years. What is there to try to strike a balance about? It seems just overwhelmingly negative. Well, nonetheless, we have to find a balance because I'm just going to read from the article. I think Politico does a good job here. President Joe Biden faces growing calls from activists and even a former crown prince to openly back regime change in Iran as the country's Islamist rulers face a wave of protests. So it's not just the American people, right? It's people even outside of America saying, like, this has gone too far. These people need to not be in power. We better step up with our might and our violence to take those people out of power and put someone else in. Politico continues here and says, but Biden and his aides are unwilling to go that far. Instead, the administration is charting a middle path, one that voices support for the Iranian protesters and helps them through both easing and imposing some sanctions, but which falls short of an all-out pressure campaign to isolate Iran's government or abandon nuclear talks with the regime, according to 6 U.S. officials familiar with the issue. In other words, this is such a big deal that there's international pressure on America to do something about it, but the American government says, yeah, but what about those Iran talks that we've been trying to do for 15 years? In other words, what should be a non-political issue, because it's about human rights. And, you know, it's true that America is the only place that has a Bill of Rights the way that we do. Nonetheless, many places in the world have copied at least those principles, if not the form of government. So freedom of speech is generally recognized as a human right, you know, in a lot of places in the world. Not in Iran. And we as a nation have stood up against violation of human rights that I would argue are lesser than this one. But now in the face of this one, we're like, oh, sorry, you know, yeah, we kind of like protesters, but there are other issues at play. And it's those other issues that are going to lead us to prophecy here. The other issues are human rights issues. America has been all about human rights. We have a Bill of Rights that says you have freedom of religion. And so the government is not allowed to decide your religion has to be this way and then punish you if you disagree. It says that you have freedom of speech. So if you don't like something, you have the right to go and protest it as long as it's peaceful, regardless of what CNN has tried to redefine over the past few years regarding peaceful protests, right? But you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to go voice your negative opinion in a peaceful way, but not in Iran. You are allowed to have a private space where the government can't come absent of compelling enough reasons to do so. But not in Iran. They'll come get you wherever you are. Right? So you can go down that Bill of Rights point by point by point by point and realize that things that we hold dear, things that we built into the most powerful legal document in our land, which has literally impacted and influenced the entire world, it's just absent in this problem in Iran. Those poor people enjoy none of these basic human rights that we enjoy in this situation, and several of them are now being put to death, with more as time goes on. Why are we doing nothing about this? And I think it's prophetic, ultimately. So join me in Revelation chapter 13. I think you're going to find that we spend a lot of time in Revelation 13 over the course of this podcast. Yeah. So maybe not all at once in any one episode, but I think if you put them all together, you're going to walk away with a decent understanding of what this chapter is all about. All right, so last segment in one of the segments we talked about this first beast in the early part of chapter 13 that is global, and it is religious, and it is military all at once, and it is the dominant global force in charge when Jesus returns. But there's a second power described in the same chapter as well. And we meet him, or it, starting in verse 11. Scripture says, "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon." Now, I'm just going to tell you from the beginning, Bible scholars generally find the United States of America in these verses. And I'm going to show you why. It's not just speculation. But I wanted to start with that. This is a prophecy of the nation that I have called home for my entire life, and my ancestors have called home for 400 years. I don't like what this prophecy says about the land of the free and the home of the brave, but it does say it. What it says ultimately is that America will not look like America at the end. So verse 12 gets to a big part of why. Verse 12 says, "And he," so this is America, "exercises all of the authority of that first beast," that global, religious, military beast from earlier in the chapter, "in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed." The point we need to take away from that for today is that America exercises someone else's authority instead of our own, due to whatever factor or combination of factors have led us into that place. Now, we're not the exception to everything, right? You keep your metric system, we're going to stick with inches and feet, like that's not the American paradigm anymore at the end of time. We are weakened, either literally or maybe financially or morally or whatever, some combination of things. We're weakened to such a degree that the authority that we exercise even no longer comes from us anymore. It's someone else's. And we become a mouthpiece for this worldly power marauding in the name of God. And I'm linking this idea to the Iranian problem because look what's happening in our government. For 2 of the last 3 presidential administrations, we have been trying to actively make nice with Iran. Giving them lots of money, giving them various freedoms, all in exchange for you don't build a nuclear bomb yet. But we're trying, right? And you can agree or disagree as to the efficacy of what we're trying. And maybe you like it, maybe you don't. That's not really what I'm talking about. It's just the fact is we've been trying. We've been trying to actively make nice with this nation that adopts none of our values, has nothing in common with us at all, and which has actively been a problem for us for my entire lifetime and more. I think this is just a glimpse of what is coming. I don't really believe that Iran has anything specific to do with Revelation 13. Maybe it does. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. But the principle at work here, where here's this group or this nation that is diametrically opposed to the things we're supposed to value in America. And in order to make nice with them, we're actually going to overlook a lot of those things that make them different from us. We're going to turn a blind eye to their human rights violations, right? We're going to say like, yeah, well, they're just killing a few protesters, right? So my point is we're actively moving away from the things that made America America and toward what is prophesied, where we're now exercising someone else's authority instead of our own. And it has to be that way. Because America, whether you like it or not, it is an undeniable fact that America is the single wealthiest, most technologically advanced, most militarily advanced society the world has ever known. Since the Garden of Eden, I mean, just hands down. Even in its weakened and debt-laden condition right now in 2022, we are still not even close to second place in terms of the nations in the world. So if we ever are going to get to that place where we're like linking arms with worldly nations, with, dare I say, demonic nations, demonically fueled nations, it has to come from a degradation of these founding principles. And if we look at verse 11, it was read once already, but I'll read it again. I saw another beast coming out of the earth. That's the American. That's the United States of America. And he had two horns like a lamb. Horns are symbols of power. So there's something about America where two of its kind of foundational pillars of power are Christ-like. They look like the Lamb of God, right? So that kind of Christian veneer, even though the rest of it says we speak like a dragon, so it's just a veneer. The things we actually say and do come from the devil, and that's always been that way. But the veneer of Christ keeps it in check, because Christ is always more powerful than the devil. So that veneer of Christianity, that kind of like protection of civil rights and protection of religious rights and elevation of the individual instead of the collective, those things have to die first. They have to go away first. They have to be weakened and destroyed first in order for the country ever to reach this prophetic point that we read about in the latter part of Revelation 13. So that's how we can dig under the surface of what's happening here to find out really the something else that is happening here as well. This is much bigger than just Iran. It's much bigger than Muslims. It's much bigger than hijabs or this poor woman who lost her life. It's bigger than whatever sanctions come and go. It's bigger than whatever political response happens. It's bigger than all the stupid media and their misrepresentation and miscorrections and all of the confusion that they put into our lives. This is a prophetic issue because we're watching as the United States compromises its own values and positions and strengths in order to pursue something else. And that is precisely exactly what is prophesied. So, let's see how long this we've been talking here. All right, I got a few minutes left before I'm going to let you go. So, turn backwards a page to Revelation chapter 12, and I'm going to take you through why the scholars believe that this power at the end of Revelation 13 is the United States. In Revelation 12, we meet a woman, and she is not a human woman. It's pretty obvious. She's standing on the moon. She's clothed in the sun. She is a symbolic figure, and she represents ultimately the people of God, right? The church, whatever form that has looked like at any point in history, it's represented by her. She, we kind of follow her existence representing the people of God through time up to the cross, right? The cross of Jesus Christ. And then after that point in verse 13, the Jesus goes up to heaven, so he's out of the grasp of the devil at that point after the cross. And so verse 13 says, when the dragon saw that he, the dragon, had been cast down to the earth after the cross, he persecuted the woman, the church, who gave birth to the male child, right? Persecuted the people of God. Since he can't reach Christ anymore, now he goes after the Christians. Verse 14 says, "But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent." That is a prophetic phrase that we don't have time to explore today, but it comes from the 7th chapter of the Old Testament book of Daniel. And when we study that out, we realize it's referring to a long period of time, 1,260 years, that corresponds to what is kind of commonly referred to as the Middle Ages. From the early 500s AD until the late 1700s AD. And so what the prophecy is telling us is that the people of God had to go into hiding. So the visible church, which looking backwards, we call it the Catholic Church, but the church at that time has very little in common with the Catholic Church of today. But that church system was not the people of God. It was marauding and, murdering and persecuting and whatnot, is not living up to the Christian principles. The actual Christian people are hiding during all of that time. Verse 15 says, "So the serpent," that's the dragon, the devil, "spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood." So the devil doesn't like that God's people are in hiding, and he tries to flush her out of hiding and destroy her. Water is representative of different peoples and nations and languages. You pick that up from chapter 17, verse 15. You get a nice definition there. So the devil is just throwing army after army, people after people, to flush the church out of hiding. And that brings us to like the 1500s, the Protestant Reformation, and all the internecine warfare that happened for a couple hundred years after that, and where Europe was just a mess. Like Christians were killing each other, Catholics versus Protestants, and all the mess. Verse 16, "But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth." So something intervenes. The earth intervenes to help the church under duress. It's being attacked by everybody, right? By the Church of England saints in England, and the Catholic saints down in Italy, and the Germanic saints, and the barbarians, and everywhere you go, right? They flee England and go to Holland, and then Holland turns on them. And so everywhere you go, you're not safe. And something stepped into history and gave God's people a place to go when they couldn't stay in Europe anymore, when they were just getting attacked by all those different people. Somewhere they could go where there were not those people there. There's a relative lack of people there. Hey, happy Thanksgiving. Where did the people go? That's right, they came here. And once again, one of my ancestors was on that boat that landed in Massachusetts in 1620. They came here. The earth is defined in Genesis chapter 1. I don't know, verse, who knows, all over the place in Genesis chapter 1. I think verse 5. Let's look at verse 5. Is that one good one? No, that's not it. Verse 9. 9 and 10. "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so, and God called the dry land earth." So earth is defined scripturally as the absence of water. Water is peoples, languages, nations, and tongues, according to Revelation 17:15. So the earth is the relative absence of all of those things. The New World, right? North America. There were people here, of course, but not in the same density and population, not in the same kind of civilization model as there was in Europe. So God's people came here to flee all of that. That's how we're tying it to Thanksgiving today. We are remembering that this is supposed to be a land where we can flee from the dangers of the world to enjoy the freedom offered to us in Jesus Christ. Or if we don't want to follow Jesus Christ, then lucky for us, we have the freedom to follow whatever we want to follow instead, right? That freedom is dangerous, and you get to choose bad things as well as good things. But that's what this is supposed to be. And as we're watching the government and the culture and the society just give away those founding principles one after another, so that now we're at a place where we have every moral reason to say, no, you're not allowed to murder people because they don't disagree with you. Instead, we're saying, yeah, but there's a deal and we want to save it. And so we're watching as the country compromises itself. I know that's not a really good place to land as we conclude and head off to Thanksgiving tomorrow and have our good food and hang out with our families. But I hope that at least it gives us one more reason to be thankful today. Things aren't great right now, but they're better than they will be. And I'm thankful for the peace and the prosperity that I have today. I'm thankful that I know my God today, and that same God will be the same in the future when all of this prophecy turns into reality. So let's spend the rest of today and all of tomorrow thankful towards God. Because even when the world turns against us, we know God is coming soon, and his kingdom will have no end. And I pray by his grace that I will be there, and my producer will be there, and you will be there too. Have a lovely Thanksgiving. We will have another segment of this episode available tomorrow, so hopefully I can talk to you even though it's Thanksgiving. But whether you see it live or on a replay, I hope you have a great holiday, that you are closer to God as a result of it, and that you'll join us again soon on Something's Happening Here. May God bless you.